Hello everyone! Hi. What's up? I hope you all are doing well. How high am I? I'm not very high actually, sadly. But I could rise more if I have a little more yeast. I'm gonna be showing off some stuff that I've baked and everything like that. I have 3 different stuff that I'm gonna go over, so it should be pretty exciting. We're gonna start the cookies! Cookie time! Okay, so basically what I'm doing here is, like, you don't have to do this. A lot of recipes don't call for it, but I like to brown the butter, which is basically, you put butter, like, in a pot or something, or a pan, and you cook it on about medium, like, heat or so. Make sure it doesn't burn, but basically, once, like, the milk solids melt from the butter, like, all that, like, white stuff that you'll see, like, on top here. See, like, that stuff? Those are milk solids. Those will like toast and like fall to the bottom of the pan. So that's what's called brown butter. It's very tasty. And I think it gives a lot of extra flavor to the cookie and it complements the cookie really well, especially chocolate chip cookies. So I think you should totally do this step. It only takes a couple minutes to brown the butter. I'll show you guys what it looks like once it's like all done and everything. Yeah, I'm just stirring. Every so often you kind of have to stir it and make sure like it doesn't stick to the bottom and burn it. Yeah, and like you kind of stir it like that. See like all like those little brown specks on the bottom there? That's all the milk solids that were a little toasted. And I put it in a little bowl. Oh, I forgot to say the measurements. Yeah, so basically for this I'm mixing in the unmelted butter with the browned butter to kind of like make it a little more solid basically, and you don't want it to be too hot or anything. So I do I think it's 8 tablespoons of unsalted butter, brown it, and then I do the other 8 tablespoons or not the other 8 I can't do math, the rest of the tablespoons of butter, and I mix it in basically until it melts. And then I usually put it in the freezer to make sure that it's not hot by the time that it gets out and everything like that. So for here, I mixed in 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1 cup of dark brown sugar, but I usually do a little bit less of the dark brown sugar because, as I said earlier, if you have a lot of brown sugar, it can cause your cookie to kind of like flatten out, and I don't like super flat cookies. I like it to have a little bit of height, you know? So I add in a little more of the regular sugar instead of the brown sugar. So I'm mixing that in with the brown butter, pretty much, here. You want to use a whisk for that so you can get it all incorporated. Oh, and the eggs! I almost forgot about the eggs. You have to put in 2 eggs in there. Some recipes call for 3, but I don't like really eggy cookies. I don't think it tastes good. But yeah. I put in like 3 teaspoons of vanilla extract because I think it needs it. And then here, you want to be careful because you don't want to overmix the flour with the butter and everything like that. Because if you overmix it, then it kind of creates a really flat cookie as well, and you do not want that. And here I chopped up a like bar of Hershey's milk chocolate because I didn't have any other chocolate or anything like that. I usually have chocolate chips, but I saw somewhere online that said if you kind of chop hand reveal, yes, there's a hand reveal muffin, but if you chop up the chocolate instead of using chocolate chips, you can get more of chocolate like in a bite, which is better than chocolate chips, and it kind of melts a little better and it looks visually better. And I actually really liked how it turned out. The Hershey's chocolate is not my favorite, so maybe if you find like a good bar of chocolate, I would really recommend using that instead of chocolate chips. But yeah. Oh, my hair. Why do I do the thumbs up? But yeah, you kind of shape it into whatever like shape that you want, or you know, like however big that you want them. And this is how they turned out. I think they turned out pretty good. They're actually really yummy. And at the end, you can kind of shape them with your hands to make them more circular, but I don't give a shit about that. So I kind of just leave them like that. but I think they turned out very tasty. But yeah, chocolate chip cookies are pretty easy to make, and you could like simplify the recipe by not browning the butter, or just using chocolate chips. I hand mix the butter and sugar. I know some people use like one of those mixers, like the electric mixers and stuff like that, but I didn't feel like doing that, and it was like 12 at night and I didn't want to wake everyone up, so I just hand mix it, and I think that turns out perfectly well. Some people will put the dough in like the freezer for a couple hours or something to make them rise a little more, but I like them like this. I don't think they really need to be like the big, like huge cookies, because I don't really like those. So this is just my preference. But yeah, let's move on to the focaccia. Whoa. So basically for the focaccia is like an Italian like flatbread type thing. And it's really tasty, and you can do a lot of different things with it. I know some people put a lot of like vegetables and shit on it, but I don't really feel like doing that ever. I just put like rosemary and stuff. I think it turns out pretty good. Yeah, so basically this one involves like yeast, as any bread does. Hand reveal. Yes, I know, hand reveal. But basically you're gonna want active dry yeast, or you can use some of the yeast that you get like in a jar or something like that. But I always use the active dry yeast because it's always the same amount that you need for a recipe. So it just makes it way easier. So you put it in a bowl of like kind of warm water, not like super hot, but like lukewarm water. So I usually heat it up in the microwave or something like that. Yeast reveal. Yes, yeast reveal. This is actually a really good brand of yeast. So you put the yeast in the water, and over time it should kind of like bloom a little bit, and you can actually see it in real time, like how it like kind of like blooms and like blossoms. It's really cool. I like yeast. I think it's fun, and the smell of it is quite good actually. So like again, like warm, not hot, because if it's too hot it will kill the yeast, and you do not want that. And it's not essential to bloom the yeast, but you always want to, because if you have dead yeast then you waste like a couple hours of doing nothing, because your bread will not rise in the oven. That's a really bad idea. But 1 1/3 cups of warm water, and then just 1 packet of that active dry yeast. I think the exact measurement is 0.25 ounces apparently. So that's something, but I never need that. A lot of people in baking get really picky about like having it be in ounces over like using like teaspoons or cups or anything, and I don't give a shit, because I don't think you need precision. In all honesty, like I don't level out my flour, I kind of just eyeball it, and I think that's much better than having precision, because I don't think it matters personally. But anyways, I'll show you guys how it kind of blooms a little bit. I think I have a video of that in here, hopefully. Oh. I'm dumping in the flour right now. I believe it is 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And for focaccia, like usually for bread, you want bread flour specifically, because it has more protein and it rises a little more and it's a little less dense than all-purpose flour is. So usually like if I'm making like a loaf of bread or something, I'm gonna use bread flour. But for focaccia, it doesn't matter, because it can be dense and it usually rises quite a bit anyways. So you can just use all-purpose flour for this. I think I actually threw in 1/2 cup of bread flour. That's just my own thing that I did, because I think it makes it a tiny bit better and a tiny bit less dense than normal. But you don't have to do that. You can just use all-purpose flour if you can't find bread flour. But I know in other countries, I think it's just a higher protein flour. I don't know if it's called bread flour there. Oh yeah, see this? Like all that stuff on top is from the yeast blooming, and the yeast is like alive. So once it reacts with the sugar that you put in the water, let's see. It is 2 teaspoons of sugar. You can also use honey, but I like using sugar because honey can be all sticky and it's kind of hard to knead it sometimes. But the yeast is like alive, and when it eats the sugar, it kind of like blooms and it looks like an explosion kind of. Which is pretty cool. Oh my god, my hand. Here I'm just mixing a bunch of extra virgin olive oil with the dough and then adding some salt. I only have coarse salt. I don't have flaky salt, which is what they recommend. But either way is fine, to be honest. I've always enjoyed it with the coarse salt. And coarse is just a little bit bigger, you know, little things of salt. But yeah, 2 teaspoons of flaky sea salt. You kind of loosely mix it together with a rubber spatula. And this is important, do not use a whisk because the whisk will get everything stuck in it. And that's a big pain in the ass. You do not want that. You do not want everything stuck in your whisk. So I always use this like silicone like spatula that I have and kind of mix everything. I use it quite a lot in a lot of recipes, so if you don't have one, I'd really recommend getting that because it saves a lot of time. I always mix stuff by hand. I don't use like the hand mixers or like stuff like that because I just think it's a little easier to tell what exactly your dough is at or what your mixture is at, and if you need to add or remove or anything, and you can kind of control the time a little better. So I recommend that. You don't have to, but you're gonna see me kneading it by hand really soon, and I just think it's better. Kneading can be a little difficult if you don't know how to do it, but I just watched some YouTuber tutorials and I just figured it out on my own. So yeah, I'm just mixing together the water and the flour, and here I am kneading it. It might be, I think the sound might be sped up because I kind of put it faster. So just ignore that. But yeah, basically I'm just kneading it. With kneading, you kind of want to push your like bottom of your palm into the dough and lift it on top of itself and like fold it on top of itself over and over again. So you incorporate all the flour into the dough. Yeah, that's basically what I'm doing right now. And I'm getting the little pieces that fall and putting it back because I don't want to waste anything. But yes, that's basically how you do it. It's kind of like hard to explain how to knead, but yeah, just push the bottom of your palm into the dough, like all the way out, and then fold it onto itself. Greeking, hell yes, Greeking. Or Mediterranean gang, in actuality. What I'm doing here is I'm putting olive oil at the bottom of the bowl, and I am covering the dough in the olive oil so it doesn't stick to anything. Some people don't do this, but I think it helps the dough not stick to anything. It's kind of easier to get it out and everything. And I kind of, you'll see here, I kind of put it on, like put the olive oil on the bowl on the sides. If you don't have like a bowl with a cover, you can use like a damp like towel, like dish towel or something like that. Or you can use like some like cling wrap or something, but just make sure you coat the cling wrap with an olive oil or some other oil that you have at home. Oh, and something that I forgot to mention. Let me go back a little bit. So like when I am kneading the dough here, I coated my hands in like olive oil so the dough doesn't stick to me, which really helps. I usually do that when I'm making bread. Like for any bread, it doesn't matter. Some people coat their hands in like the flour, but I don't like doing that because I feel like things still stick really easily. But with olive oil, it doesn't like stick at all, and it's really easy to knead it. Because I know a lot of people who are making bread for like the first time or something like that, the bread like really sticks to your hand, or the dough really sticks to your hand, like a lot. Use olive oil, coat your hands while you're kneading the dough. It makes it much easier. Let's go past this again. Yeah. So yeah, during this period, I'm letting the dough rise overnight. But for focaccia, you actually only need to... Why did I do that? Why did I do that? Anyways, for focaccia, you only need to really let it rise for about 2 hours or something like that. It's a really like quick like bread that you can make. But I just let it be overnight because I didn't feel like putting it in the oven that night. So I was like, I'm just gonna let it rise overnight and see how it turns out. And it turned out pretty good. Yeah, I'm letting it rise and everything. And this is the next day. So something that you guys are going to see. Let me explain it for you. When you like open up the container and you see that the dough is all risen, you want to punch the dough. And I'm not joking. This is actually something that you have to do. You have to punch the dough down to get out like some of the excess air bubbles. You're gonna see me punch it. And I punch it again and again. You only need to punch it once, but I was taking my anger out on the dough. But yeah, I get a nice baking sheet with like parchment paper, and this is how it looks like all spread out. Yeah, you want to like kind of spread it out because focaccia is like a really like flat bread, so you don't want it like in a ball like you normally do for like other breads. So you kind of like spread it out, fit it to the baking sheet or whatever container that you have. Yeah, here, you actually, once you spread it out and you have it on the baking sheet, you want to cover it with a damp towel or like cling wrap or something like that for like 20 minutes to just let it rise a tiny bit more before you bake it and put it in the oven. And it also gives you time to preheat the oven. I think for the focaccia, it is, what temperature? Let's check. 400 degrees Fahrenheit for the focaccia in specific. Yeah, you let it rise on the baking sheet for 20 minutes before you put it in. Very important step. Once you let it rise for another 20 minutes and everything like that, you take it off, and for focaccia, it has like these little like dimples, these little holes in it, if you've ever seen it. So you kind of like use both of your hands and kind of like dimple the bread or the dough with it. So here, basically, you want to put more olive oil on it. I know there's already a lot of olive oil in this recipe, but you want to put more on top of it so it browns really nicely in the oven. So you kind of, I cut out this part. I cut out this upcoming part because the noises it made were really weird. But you want to like spread it and like use your hands to kind of like spread all the olive oil onto the bread. Make sure it gets in all the little holes and everything. You can just mute it. I was considering it, but anyway. So for toppings for focaccia, usually, like I just do fresh rosemary. I used to have fresh rosemary in my garden, but Dougal had some now, so he gave some to me, which is very nice. And I just sprinkle it all on top of the focaccia. Make sure that it kind of gets into it. You can also put the rosemary like in the dough when you're making the dough, but I forgot to do that this time. So that'll be next time. Yeah, kind of sprinkle it all. This is Dougal helping me sprinkle it onto the focaccia. Are you Chef Jamie Oliver? No, I'm Chef Pandora Fox. It kind of clumped, so that's why we were laughing at the end. And then I'm sprinkling some flaky salt onto it, or coarse salt, because I don't have flaky salt. But make sure you don't get too much salt in one area, because you do not want a really salty bite. Dougal Left Pro, yes, yes. Dougal's also gonna appear soon, really quick. And then once you're all done with that, once you're all done with the toppings, you're gonna want to put it, this is Dougal's hand here. You're gonna want to put it into the oven. And yeah, and then you take it out and you can eat it. Wow. And this is how it turned out. It turned out actually really, really tasty and really good this time. I think it's because I let it rise for a while. I think that was a really good decision. How long in the oven? Oh, right. I forgot to say thank you for reminding me. You keep it in there for about 20 minutes, I believe, but we kept it in for like 25 or like 30 because my oven kind of sucks. And I always need to leave stuff in there for longer, and it wasn't browning enough for my taste, so I kind of left it in a little longer. But like, again, like, you don't have to follow the recipe like point blank. You can kind of just go off of what you think is good and what looks visually best to you. Yes, I think I said it was at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for this. I said that earlier, I believe. But yes, you want to make sure you preheat it like while you're like putting all the toppings on it, so you have enough time by the time that it's done preheating. And like, you can kind of dip your focaccia in olive oil and stuff if you wanted to, which I think is pretty tasty. More olive oil, I know. I literally have so much olive oil all the time. It's so weird, but... Or sometimes I'll like chop up like olives and feta and some olive oil and some spices and stuff like that, like herbs and seasoning, and dip it into that, and that's really tasty too. It's so good, so good. You can make a sandwich with it if you want. Focaccia makes really good sandwich bread, but I didn't do that this time. Next and last one is the biscuits. Oh my god, the biscuits is the longest video, I believe. So to start, you want 8 tablespoons of frozen butter, and that's like very, very important. You really want frozen butter and not like solid butter or like room temperature butter or anything like that. because frozen butter and like cold ingredients in biscuits help the biscuits rise more, and it helps the layers develop better. So you always want really, really cold ingredients, and that's the key for having good biscuits. Can't believe it's not butter. This is butter. It's butter, I swear. Yes, so what I do, it's a little weird. I saw someone mention doing it a long time ago, because I don't have like the butter like cutter thing that like incorporates like butter like for making like pastries and stuff like that. I don't have that tool, so I use a grater, and I shred the butter using that, and it works because the butter is frozen, so it's fairly easy to do it, but it takes a little bit. It's the hardest part of this recipe. Everything else is really easy, but if you don't want to do that, you can cut the butter, or like you can use like room temperature butter and freeze it. Once you've cut up into like really, really, really tiny pieces, you can freeze it, but it might take a little more time than everything like that. You sure? Okay. I'm doing it in this clip coming up. Hold on, excuse you. But yeah, I actually just used the shredder. But yes, I will put a disclaimer. Dougal did most of it. But anyways. And then here, I'm going to be making buttermilk. And you want the milk cold. You do not want the milk warm again as well. 1 cup of milk, in my case, it would just be 1 cup of buttermilk if you have buttermilk. But again, we're going to be making buttermilk. Yeah, I pour the milk into a bowl, and there's a couple different things that you can do here. You can either add, lemon juice, or you can add white distilled vinegar, is pretty common. Those ones you usually have in your houses somewhere, I think. So I put in a couple teaspoons of lemon juice. You can look up the conversion for making buttermilk online if you need like a specific amount. Like for 1 cup I use 2 teaspoons. Yeah, you let the milk sit for 10 minutes so it can develop into buttermilk. And then you have your own buttermilk, homemade buttermilk. Very awesome, very epic. And it should be like a tiny bit clumpy, but not like super clumpy or anything. But that's how you can tell once it's developed. Here's the shredded butter. I usually, after I shred the butter, I put it in the freezer while I'm making the buttermilk. And I will take the bowl of flour that I made, or flour that I poured in the bowl, and I'll also put it in the freezer so everything's really, really, really cold, which is really, really important for biscuits. I can't stress that enough. Yeah, I do that usually while I'm waiting for the buttermilk, so like 10 minutes. Here I'm making, oh, this is the lemon juice for the buttermilk here. Yeah. Pog. Kind of mix it together so everything gets incorporated. Yeah, for the flour, I believe it's 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So I'm just putting 2 cups in a bowl, and then I put it in the freezer for a little bit. Put in 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and you do need both. It's really important that you need both, because baking powder and baking soda are slightly different. And you do not want to add too much of baking soda because it can have like a weird taste. And if you only use baking soda, like it tastes a lot like baking soda. That's my first mistake that I made when I first made biscuits a long time ago, because I didn't have baking powder and I was stubborn, and the end result tasted very, very much like baking soda, which is a mistake. And then I think 1/4 teaspoons of salt, just any salt that you have. Here you want to like stir in all the butter with the flour. Usually this is where you'd use that certain tool to kind of mix in the butter, but I don't have that. So the shredded butter here makes it so it's small enough that I don't have to worry about that. So that's why I think it's a good idea. And mixing the buttermilk into the middle of the flour and mixing that together with a silicone spatula, same one. It's Christmas themed for some reason, I don't know why. But you don't want to mix it too much, just until that there's not really much flour showing at the moment. But you do not want to mix it too much, because if you overmix it, then it might not rise as much as you want it to, which is no fun. You don't want that. You want really cool risen biscuits. was gonna say hi biscuits, but anyways. So you put the dough onto a floured like space. So you always want to put flour on the bottom so it doesn't stick to like the table or whatever you have it on. So I'm kind of gently pressing it into a rectangle, and I like fold it onto itself. Here, hold on. I fold it onto itself here. So I take the bottom and I fold it onto the top and then press it down a little bit. So I kind of alternate between folding the top down and then the bottom up type of thing. So see, I'm folding from the top and I'm kind of like turning it a little bit. There's a video that I can send that kind of shows this a little better because it's kind of hard to explain, but basically you're alternating because you want like really developed layers in your biscuits. So I don't have a little like circle like thing that you usually use to stamp up dough like for cookies and biscuits. So as you can see, I'm using a wine glass to like get the little circular shape that you need for the biscuits. And it's really important to like press down and not twist it too much because you do not want the edges like disturbed. Because if you disturb the edges, then you're not going to get those distinct layers that you want with biscuits. So that's what I'm doing here. So as you can see, I'm just stamping out the dough a little bit with the wine glass. Oh my goodness. So as you can see, I only have like 4 here, but I'm putting them in a little pan. Usually I actually make them on a baking sheet, but I had a little cake pan this time, so I used that. And as you can see here, I'm using the remainder of the excess dough that I had from stamping out the biscuits, and I've gently pushed it together. You don't want to smush it too much because you don't want to disturb the layers of butter and everything like that. So you kind of push it together and you can get like 2 more out of this. Yeah, and then you put it in the oven, 450 degrees Fahrenheit. It's pretty high temperature for biscuits, but you want them to rise and not cook too much because you want them really, really flaky and soft. So you have like a high temperature, but a generally low baking time for about 13 to 15 minutes. You can do a little longer if you want them a little more brown on the top. Honey butter goes really, really well on biscuits. Take them out of the oven, blah, blah, blah. See how much they've risen? Though some of them are a little uneven because I kind of fucked up when folding the dough. I couldn't remember which sides I had already folded, like in which way. So they're a little uneven, but they still rose like a very good amount. So it's still very tasty, and that's what matters the most, of course. But yeah, so you brush them with the honey butter. Very important. You always want more butter on top of them. And very, very tasty. I left them in, I think, for a couple more minutes because I wanted the top to be a little more brown. So that's why they have a little more color. As you can see, the biscuit in the middle was the mangled one. Yeah, this is how it turned out. It was very, very tasty. You can eat it with like jam, or you can just dip it in the honey butter or something like that. So tasty. You can make tiny little sandwiches out of them sometimes. But yeah, it was so good. I make biscuits a lot because it only takes 30 minutes to make this. Sometimes less if you're pretty fast, but I get distracted very easily. So, you know, that's my own problem. That's the inside after they kind of got a little mangled, but yeah, they turned out very good.